They laughed at the ex-military for isolating his house, but he saved everyone in the blizzard. Marcus Sterling arrived in Truckee carrying nothing but a battered army backpack and a distant look that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 battles. The former sergeant of the United States Army had chosen that small town in the Sierra Nevada mountains to try to find the peace that the training fields and interior missions had never given him. But it was when he started building that strange fence around his property that the neighbors began to look at him with suspicion. Every day, from dawn until dusk, Marcus worked methodically erecting a wooden barrier that seemed disproportionate for a simple lot on the outskirts of town. "That man is hiding something," muttered Mrs. Dorothy Higgins, 68, while spying from her kitchen window. The retiree had lived on that street for over 40 years and had never seen anyone do so many renovations on such a small house. What most intrigued the residents was Marcus's obsession with thermal insulation. He had bought enormous quantities of fiberglass, insulating material, and top-quality wood at Wright's hardware store. The shopkeeper, initially pleased with the generous sales, began to grow curious about the newcomer's plans. "I've never seen anyone buy so much material at once," Samuel commented to his wife Elizabeth, "and I've sold material for plenty of renovations around town. This guy's building a bunker or something." Marcus completely ignored the curious glances and whispers spreading through the neighborhood. He had learned in his military career that proper preparation was the difference between life and tragedy, and he wasn't about to give up that principle now that he finally had a place to call home. His routine was as rigorous as in his barracks days. He woke up at 5 in the morning, did physical exercises in the backyard, took a cold shower, and began the work of fortifying his house. The first task was always to check the thermal insulation on the walls, then organize the firewood stocks he personally cut in the nearby woods. "Mom, that man is cutting trees again," complained Chloe, Dorothy's teenage daughter. "That obsession with firewood can't be normal. We barely use the fireplace here at home." Dorothy nodded worriedly. In fact, few houses in the region had efficient heating systems. The climate in Truckee could be harsh in winter, but most families got by with extra blankets and simple electric heaters. Marcus, however, was installing a wood-burning heating system that seemed excessive for a single person. He had built a central furnace that distributed heat throughout the house, through ducts he himself welded and installed. The neighbors watched perplexed as he worked with the precision of an engineer. "That guy is way too weird," said Kenneth Crawford, a retired mechanic who lived 2 houses down. "Who needs that much heating? Must have something wrong in the head." The suspicion intensified when Marcus began making bulk purchases at the town square market. Every week he arrived with an extensive list and bought enough supplies to feed an entire family for months. Canned goods, grains, oil, sugar, salt, basic medications, everything in quantities that seemed excessive for a single person. "Mrs. Martha, that new man is buying food like the world is ending," young cashier Megan commented to the store owner. Martha Henderson, of German descent and one of the most respected shopkeepers in town, watched Marcus's purchases with growing concern. At 71, she had enough experience to tell the difference between normal preparation and suspicious behavior. "I'm keeping an eye on him," replied Martha, adjusting her glasses. "A lone man buying enough food for a battalion isn't up to any good." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot since we're just starting out. Now continuing. Marcus Sterling's social isolation deepened with each passing day. He would greet neighbors politely when he met them on the street, but never stopped for long conversations. His answers were always direct, and he showed urgency to get back to work on his property. This attitude fueled even more rumors about his true intentions. "He doesn't even look at us properly when he talks," complained Sarah Mitchell, a retired teacher who had tried several times to strike up a conversation with Marcus. "He seems like he's always calculating something in his head. It gives me chills just thinking about it." The situation got even tenser when Marcus refused the invitation to take part in the community's traditional winter harvest festival. Dorothy, who coordinated the event's organization, had personally gone to his house to invite him, in an attempt to integrate him into the neighborhood's social life. "Thank you for the invite, but I can't take part," said Marcus, standing at his door without inviting Dorothy in. I have a lot of work to finish before winter. But it's just one night of celebration, young man, insisted Dorothy, trying to peek inside the house. The whole community will be there. It's a good opportunity for you to meet everyone. I really appreciate it, but I can't, repeated Marcus, gently closing the door. Dorothy left his property even more intrigued. During the few seconds she managed to see inside the house, she noticed organized stacks of supplies, military tools hanging on the walls, and an arrangement that looked more like a storage depot than a home. At the Winter Harvest Festival, Marcus was the main topic of conversation. The residents openly speculated about his activities and motivations, creating increasingly elaborate theories about what he might be hiding. I bet he's a deserter from the army, said Kenneth, drinking mulled cider by the bonfire. That's why he doesn't want to mix with us. He must be running from something. Or else he's planning something shady, added Samuel. A man who buys materials like he does isn't building a normal house. It could be a drug lab or something worse. Elizabeth, Samuel's wife, shook her head worriedly. She had grown up hearing stories of World War II told by her German grandfather, and Marcus's behavior reminded her of accounts about people who prepared for conflicts or disasters. Did you notice he tests his equipment at the same time every day? Remarked Chloe, Dorothy's daughter. Every day at 7 in the evening, he turns on those noisy engines for about 15 minutes. Indeed, Marcus had established a routine of preventive maintenance on all his equipment. Electric generators, chainsaw, power tools, heating system, everything was tested religiously to guarantee perfect operation when needed. That's not normal, agreed Sarah. It looks like he's getting ready for war or the end of the world. That kind of person is dangerous. The neighborhood children started making up fantastic stories about the strange man on the mountain, as they began calling him. They made up that he kept secret weapons, that he talked to himself at night, and that his fence was actually a trap to catch curious people. Mommy, the man from the fence was looking at our house last night, said Toby, Sarah's 7-year-old son. He stood there at his window for a long time. Sarah felt a chill. He didn't know if his son was making it up, or if Marcus really was watching them. Either way, he decided it was best to keep his distance and tell the boy not to play near the former soldier's property. The tension escalated when Father James, who ran the local parish, decided to pay a pastoral visit to Marcus. The clergyman, worried about the divisions emerging in the community, believed that an honest conversation could clear up misunderstandings. "Good afternoon, my son," the priest greeted when Marcus opened the door. "I'm Father James, from St. Jude's Church. I came to meet you and see if you need anything." Marcus received the priest courteously, but his body language remained defensive. He answered the questions politely but superficially, avoiding revealing personal details about his past or his projects. "Thanks for the visit, Father. I'm not very religious, but I respect everyone's faith," Marcus said. "I don't need anything right now. I'm just getting ready for winter." "Getting ready how, my son?" the priest insisted, genuinely curious. "The neighbors say you're doing a lot of renovations. Can I help with anything?" Marcus hesitated for a moment, as if weighing how much he could reveal. Finally, he decided to be a bit more open with the clergyman. "Father, I learned in the army that it's always better to be prepared for any situation," Marcus explained. "Up here in the Sierra Nevada mountains, winter can be harsher than people think. I'm just making sure my house can handle any storm." The priest sensed sincerity in Marcus's words, but also noticed an underlying anxiety that seemed out of proportion for simple winter preparations. There was something deeper driving that behavior, something Marcus wasn't ready to share. "If you ever need to talk about anything, my door is always open," the priest offered before saying goodbye. "The community can be a little suspicious of new people, but deep down, they're good folks." "I understand, Father. Thanks for the visit," Marcus replied, walking him to the gate. After the priest's visit, some residents grew even more suspicious. If even the clergyman hadn't been able to find out what Marcus was really doing, then he must be hiding something very serious. The situation reached the point where some people started avoiding walking past his house. Sarah told her son not to play in the street when Marcus was working in the yard. Dorothy began closing her windows when he tested his equipment. Samuel started charging higher prices for sales to Marcus, justifying that large quantities of materials had a special cost. If he wants to buy that much material, let him pay a fair price, Samuel rationalized to his wife. His money seems too easy to come by. It might be coming from the wrong place. Marcus noticed the growing hostility, but decided not to confront the neighbors. His military experience had taught him that sometimes the best strategy was to keep a low profile and stay focused on his goals. He knew his preparation was necessary, even if no one else understood. During the long nights of work on his house, Marcus reflected on the choices that had brought him there. His military memories were marked by situations where inadequate preparation had cost dearly. Not just equipment, but human lives. He carried deep emotional scars that kept him from relaxing when he sensed signs of potential danger. The forced isolation from his neighbors paradoxically reinforced his conviction that he was doing the right thing. If people couldn't understand the importance of being prepared, it just showed how vulnerable and naive they were in the face of the real dangers the world offered. In October, Marcus intensified his preparation activities even further. He had consulted historical weather data for the region and knew that Truckee could face extremely harsh winters with temperatures well below zero and significant snowfall. "This man is getting stranger every day," observed Dorothy, watching Marcus stack firewood in industrial quantities. "It looks like he expects to be isolated for months." What Dorothy didn't know was that Marcus had identified worrying climate patterns in the weather data. The last winter had been milder than the historical average, which could mean the next one would be compensatorily more severe. His analyses, based on military survival training, indicated a high probability of extreme weather conditions. Beyond thermal insulation and the heating system, Marcus was implementing backup systems for electrical power. He had bought generators of different capacities and was storing enough fuel to keep them running for weeks. He also installed water collection and purification systems in case the public supply was interrupted. "Did you see those drums he put in the backyard?" Kenneth asked Samuel. "There must be about 2,200-liter drums. What the hell is he storing in there?" In reality, Marcus was storing drinking water, fuel for the generators, and even water for medical emergencies. His military experience had taught him that in crisis situations, clean water could be more valuable than gold. Suspicion reached its peak when Marcus began receiving deliveries of basic medical equipment, bandages, first aid medications, veterinary antibiotics that could be adapted for humans in emergencies, simple resuscitation equipment. To observant neighbors, that looked like preparation for something very sinister. "Now he's buying medicine as if he's opening a hospital," Martha commented to her customers at the market. "A single man buying morphine and strong antibiotics is planning something bad, you can be sure of that." What Martha didn't understand was that Marcus had witnessed situations where people died from lack of basic medical care during forced isolations. He wasn't going to let that happen if he faced a prolonged emergency. The conspiracy theories multiplied. Some thought Marcus was setting up a clandestine drug lab. Others suspected he was a fugitive from justice preparing for a police siege. The most imaginative even speculated that he was a secret agent setting up an operations base. "My sister lives in San Francisco and knows people in the State Patrol," Megan said during an impromptu meeting at Dorothy's house. "I can ask her to check if this man has a police record." The meeting had been called by Dorothy, who was genuinely concerned about the neighborhood's safety. 10 residents gathered to discuss what to do about Marcus. The atmosphere was tense, with everyone sharing their observations and suspicions. "He never receives any visitors," Elizabeth observed. "A normal man has family, friends. This one doesn't have a single person coming to see him." "And have you noticed he never leaves town?" Kenneth added. "In 2 months living here, I've never seen him hit the road to anywhere." Dorothy coordinated the discussion as if it were a homeowners association meeting. She had prepared a list of Marcus's suspicious behaviors and wanted everyone to vote on whether they should go to the local authorities. "First question, has anyone here ever seen this man do anything clearly illegal?" Dorothy asked. There was an awkward silence. In truth, no one had witnessed Marcus doing anything explicitly wrong. He paid his bills on time, greeted neighbors politely when he saw them, and kept his property clean and tidy. Technically, there was nothing illegal about his behavior. But it's just too strange, insisted Sarah. Normal people don't act like this. There's something wrong even if we can't prove it. I agree, said Samuel. At my store, I see all kinds of customers. This guy isn't normal. The way he buys things, the quantities, the hurry. It's like he's always running from something. The meeting ended with the decision to keep a closer watch on Marcus and document any suspicious activity. Dorothy was put in charge of organizing discreet observation shifts to ensure someone was always watching his movements. Marcus, of course, noticed the increased surveillance. His military training made him very aware of observation and counter-observation. He knew exactly when he was being watched and by whom. This made him even more alert, creating a cycle of mutual paranoia that intensified every day. They're watching me because I'm different, Marcus thought as he organized his supplies. If they knew what I know about what could happen this winter, they'd be doing the same thing I am. The irony of the situation was that Marcus truly wanted to help the community, but his way of showing concern was seen as a threat. He had considered several times trying to talk to his neighbors about preparing for climate emergencies, but the growing hostility made any approach too risky. In November, Marcus intensified his activities even further. He had analyzed the latest weather data, and his concerns were being confirmed. Forecast models indicated the possibility of an exceptionally harsh winter, with snowstorms more intense than the region's historical average. This winter is going to be tough, Marcus muttered, studying weather maps on his computer. Much tougher than these people realize. He decided to make one more attempt to warn the community, even at the risk of being misunderstood. Marcus printed out weather data and analyses about the approaching winter, intending to distribute them to the neighbors as a way to contribute to collective preparation. His first approach was with Father James, who had shown more openness during the pastoral visit. Marcus went to the church on a Sunday after Mass, when he knew the priest would be available to talk. "Father, can I speak with you for a few minutes?" Marcus asked, approaching respectfully. "Of course, my son. How have you been?" the priest replied, genuinely interested. Marcus showed the printed weather data, explaining his analyses of the coming winter. He talked about climate patterns, historical temperatures, snowfall, and the risks to a community that wasn't adequately prepared. "Look at this data, Father," Marcus said, pointing to graphs and tables. "The forecasts indicate a much harsher winter than normal. Temperatures could stay below 10 degrees below zero for days in a row." The priest studied the documents carefully. He didn't have the technical knowledge to fully evaluate the analyses, but he could see that Marcus had invested significant time and effort in that study. "And what do you think we should do?" the priest asked. "The community needs to prepare," Marcus replied urgently. "Thermal insulation in the houses, a stockpile of heating fuel, emergency supplies, backup systems for electricity. If the forecasts hold, people could be stranded for days or even weeks." The priest could see the sincerity and genuine concern in Marcus's voice. For the first time, he began to understand that all that obsessive behavior might not be paranoia, but rather preparation based on real knowledge. "Would you like to present this information to the community?" the priest suggested. "I can organize a meeting at the parish." Marcus hesitated. He knew the neighbors already viewed him with suspicion, and a formal presentation could be interpreted as an attempt to manipulate or spread unnecessary panic. "I don't know if they'd listen to me, Father," Marcus admitted. "People here see me as a threat, not as someone trying to help." "Let me talk to a few residents first," the priest proposed. "Maybe I can pave the way for a more productive conversation." Marcus thanked him and handed over copies of the weather data to the priest. He had done his part by trying to warn the community. If people chose not to prepare, at least his conscience would be clear. The priest took Marcus's analyses seriously and decided to discreetly talk to some influential people in the community. First, he sought out Dorothy, who coordinated many of the neighborhood's social activities. "Dorothy, I need to talk to you about our new neighbor," the priest said, visiting her at home. "Father James!" Dorothy exclaimed, surprised by the visit. "Come in. Would you like a cup of coffee?" While they had coffee, the priest showed the weather data that Marcus had shared. He explained the former military man's concerns about the approaching winter and his attempt to warn the community. "Dorothy, I understand that you're worried about his behavior," the priest said carefully. but after talking to him and seeing these analyses, I think maybe we're misjudging his intentions." Dorothy examined the papers skeptically. She didn't know much about meteorology, but she could see that there was serious work behind those forecasts. "Father, even if he's right about the winter, why didn't he come talk to us first?" Dorothy questioned. "That secretive way of his makes everything seem suspicious." "Maybe he tried to isolate himself because he noticed people's distrust," the priest suggested. "Sometimes we create vicious cycles without realizing it." Dorothy reflected on the priest's words. It was possible that the community had created a hostile environment that forced Marcus into isolation, when in fact he might have good intentions. "What does the father suggest we do?" Dorothy asked. "How about we organize a meeting to discuss winter preparation?" the priest proposed. "We can invite Marcus to share his knowledge, but in a more neutral and constructive setting." Dorothy agreed to think about the proposal, but she knew that convincing the other neighbors would be difficult. The distrust had taken deep root, and any approach to Marcus would be viewed with suspicion. The priest also talked to Martha at the market, taking advantage of a moment when she was alone to discreetly bring up the subject. "Martha, have you noticed anything strange about the purchases Marcus is making?" the priest asked, feigning casualness. "Father, that man buys as if the world were coming to an end," Martha replied immediately. "Huge quantities of everything. It's not normal." The priest showed the weather data to Martha, explaining the forecasts for the harsh winter. He highlighted how the supplies Marcus was stockpiling made sense in the context of preparing for extreme weather conditions. "See, Martha," the priest said, pointing to a chart. "If we are isolated for a week or two without electricity and with very low temperatures, these supplies could mean the difference between struggling and being comfortable." Martha studied the documents carefully. As an experienced shopkeeper, she had good instincts for assessing risks and opportunities. Marcus Sterling's analyses seemed well-founded, and his purchases were starting to make sense from this new perspective. "Father, if what's written here is true, then all of us should be preparing," Martha concluded. "That man might be right and we might all be wrong." "That's exactly what I think," the priest agreed. "Maybe we should give him a chance to help us, instead of treating him like a threat." Martha committed to supporting a potential community meeting about winter preparation. She also promised to observe Marcus with less prejudice and more understanding of his real motivations. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, moving on. While the priest worked discreetly to shift the perception of Marcus, the situation in the neighborhood remained tense. Sarah had set up a communication system with other mothers to monitor the former soldier's movements and ensure the kids stayed away from his property. "Girls, let's keep our eyes wide open," Sarah said during a meeting at the school where she worked. "That man might seem calm, but you never know what people like that are capable of." The mothers in the community created a messaging group to share information about Marcus. Any unusual activity on his property was immediately reported to everyone, creating a constant surveillance network that intensified the atmosphere of paranoia. Marcus clearly noticed this organized watch. His military training made him extremely aware of observation techniques, and he could identify when he was being watched and by whom. This awareness only reinforced his isolation and his conviction that the community saw him as an enemy. "They don't understand that I'm trying to prepare to protect everyone," Marcus thought as he organized his medical supplies. "If they knew what I saw in military operations, they'd understand why it's so important to be ready for any emergency." Marcus's military memories were dominated by situations where a lack of proper preparation had led to unnecessary suffering. He had taken part in relief missions where people died simply because they didn't have basic supplies or functioning equipment during prolonged emergencies. One particularly painful memory was of a rescue operation in a rural area cut off by a flood. The local community had no emergency preparation whatsoever, and Marcus had witnessed entire families suffering from a lack of food, clean water, medicine, and adequate heating. Children and the elderly were the most affected, and some situations could have been avoided with basic preparation. I'll never let that happen where I am again, Marcus had promised himself after that mission. If I can prevent people from suffering due to a lack of preparation, I'll do everything in my power. This personal promise was what drove his obsession with preparation. It wasn't paranoia or mental instability, but a deep commitment based on real traumatic experiences. Marcus knew emergencies could happen at any moment, and when they did, prior preparation would be the difference between life and death. In December, weather data confirmed Marcus's concerns. Forecast models were converging on a scenario of an exceptionally harsh winter, with the possibility of intense snowstorms and extremely low temperatures for the region. The predictions are coming true, Marcus muttered, analyzing the latest data. This winter is going to be historic. He decided to make one last attempt to warn the community directly. Marcus prepared a simple and clear document, explaining the weather forecasts and suggesting basic preparation measures that each family should consider. His strategy was to leave copies of the document in all the neighbors' mailboxes during the early morning hours to avoid direct confrontations. The document included a list of recommended supplies, simple thermal insulation tips, and basic emergency procedures for situations of prolonged isolation. When the residents found the documents in the morning, the reaction was mixed. Some became even more suspicious, interpreting it as an attempt to manipulate or spread panic. Others began to seriously consider the information, especially after the conversations Father James had had with influential people in the community. "What do you all think of this?" asked Dorothy, showing the document to her friends during the weekly prayer group meeting. The women studied the forecasts and recommendations carefully. Several of them were experienced grandmothers who remembered harsh winters from the past, when the region truly faced difficulties due to a lack of adequate preparation. "My grandmother always told stories of winters that left the town isolated for weeks," recalled Martha. "People suffered hardships because they weren't prepared." "That's true," agreed Mrs. Abigail, a 78-year-old woman who was one of the oldest residents in the region. "I myself have lived through winters like that when I was young. We'd be without power, without proper heating, with little food. It was a lot of suffering." The memories of the older women began to lend credibility to Marcus's concerns. They knew from their own experience that harsh winters were a reality in the region, even if the younger ones hadn't experienced extreme situations recently. "Maybe this man isn't so strange after all," Dorothy reflected. "Perhaps he's just being more careful than we are." Mrs. Abigail, who had lived many decades in the region, decided to take a bold step. She resolved to visit Marcus personally to talk about his concerns and offers of help. "If this young man is really trying to help, someone needs to give him a chance," Abigail said to her granddaughter, who was trying to dissuade her from the visit. "Grandma, it could be dangerous," the granddaughter argued. "Everyone says he's strange." "My dear, I've lived long enough to know how to tell dangerous people from different people," Abigail replied firmly, "and this young man seems more worried than dangerous to me." The next day, Abigail knocked on Marcus's door with an apple pie she had prepared especially for the occasion. She believed homemade food was the best way to start any difficult conversation. "Good afternoon, young man," Abigail greeted when Marcus opened the door, visibly surprised by the visit. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Marcus replied, noticing the pie in her hands. "Can I help you with something?" "Actually, I came to talk to you about this coming winter," Abigail said directly. "I read the paper you left in the mailbox. I wanted to know if you really think it's going to be that severe." Marcus was moved by the first positive approach he had received since arriving in town. He invited Abigail inside and offered her coffee, eager to finally have a constructive conversation about his concerns. "Ma'am, can I show you the data I have?" Marcus asked, leading her to his work desk. "I'm not a professional meteorologist, but I learned to analyze weather patterns during my time in the army." Abigail watched fascinated as Marcus explained his analyses. She could sense real knowledge behind that obsession, not paranoia or mental instability, as some neighbors speculated. "Young man, you're right to be worried," Abigail said after hearing the explanations. "I've lived through winters like this in my youth. Younger folks don't know how tough it can get." Marcus felt a huge relief, finding someone who understood his concerns. He shared his military memories about weather emergencies. and explained why he saw proper preparation as a moral responsibility. "I don't want anyone here to go through what I've seen others endure," Marcus said sincerely. "That's why I prepared so much and tried to warn everyone." Mrs. Abigail was impressed by the generosity behind Marcus's actions. She realized he wasn't just preparing for his own safety, but thinking of the whole community. "Why didn't you say this to everyone before?" asked Mrs. Abigail. "I tried, Ma'am," Marcus replied sadly, "but people see me as a threat, not as someone trying to help. I chose to focus on preparing and hoped I'd be wrong about the winter." Mrs. Abigail understood Marcus's dilemma and decided to become his ally in trying to prepare the community. She had credibility and respect among the neighbors, qualities Marcus lacked due to the initial misunderstandings. "How about I help you talk to people?" suggested Mrs. Abigail. "They'll listen to me more than to you, at least at first." Marcus accepted the offer gratefully. He finally had an ally in the community, someone who could bridge the gap between him and the suspicious neighbors. Mrs. Abigail started her reconciliation work that same day. She visited Dorothy first, knowing that neighbor was influential in the social organization of the neighborhood. "Dorothy, I need to tell you something important about our new neighbor," said Mrs. Abigail, sitting down in Dorothy's living room. "What happened, Mrs. Abigail? Did he do something?" asked Dorothy, immediately worried. "He did," replied Mrs. Abigail with a smile. "He tried to warn us about a winter that could be very tough, and we all treated him like a criminal." Mrs. Abigail told her about her conversation with Marcus, explaining his real motivations and his genuine attempt to help the community. She described the weather data and the grounded concerns of the former serviceman. "Dorothy, that young man isn't dangerous," said Mrs. Abigail with conviction. "He's just someone who knows more than we do about these things and is trying to protect us." Dorothy listened carefully, beginning to feel embarrassed about her baseless suspicions. Mrs. Abigail's perspective, as a respected and sensible person, was completely changing her understanding of Marcus. "Mrs. Abigail, if you think he has good intentions, then maybe we should give him a chance," Dorothy admitted. "That's exactly what I'm thinking," Mrs. Abigail agreed. "How about we organize a meeting for him to explain these forecasts to everyone?" Dorothy agreed to help organize the meeting, but she knew convincing other neighbors would be a bigger challenge. Kenneth and Samuel in particular had shown more intense hostility toward Marcus. Mrs. Abigail also talked to Martha at the market, reinforcing the shift in perspective that Father James had started earlier. "Martha, you need to get to know this young man better before you keep being suspicious of him," said Mrs. Abigail. "I talked to him today, and I can guarantee his intentions are good." Martha was already more open to possibilities after her talk with the priest, and Mrs. Abigail's endorsement strengthened her willingness to give Marcus a chance. "Mrs. Abigail, if you vouch for him, then I'll also try to be more understanding," Martha promised. Mrs. Abigail's reconciliation work was gradually paying off. Her credibility and wisdom, earned over decades in the community, gave weight to her words in a way Marcus could never achieve on his own. In a few days, Abigail managed to organize an informal meeting at Dorothy's house to discuss winter preparation. She convinced 10 families to participate, including some of the most resistant to accepting Marcus. "Folks, let's give this young man a chance to explain what he knows," Abigail said, opening the meeting. "If he's wrong, we lose nothing. If he's right and we don't listen, we might regret it a lot." Marcus arrived at the meeting nervous but prepared. He had put together simple and straightforward presentations, avoiding technical jargon that might confuse or intimidate the neighbors. "Everyone, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you," Marcus began humbly. "I know my behavior may have seemed strange, but I want to explain why I'm so worried about this winter." He presented the weather data clearly and accessibly, explaining the patterns he had identified and the forecasts for the coming months. Marcus compared the predicted conditions with historical winters in the region, using examples that the older residents could recognize. "Look at these temperatures here," Marcus said, pointing to a chart. "If the forecasts hold, we're going to have at least 1 week with temperatures below 10 degrees below zero. That hasn't happened in 20 years in this region." Dorothy studied the data with growing attention. She was beginning to understand why Marcus had prepared so intensively. "And what does that mean in practical terms for our homes?" Dorothy asked. "It means houses without proper insulation will become uninhabitable," Marcus answered honestly. "Normal heating systems won't be able to maintain safe temperatures, and if there are heavy snowstorms, we could be isolated for days without electricity." The reality began to dawn on those present. Marcus wasn't exaggerating or spreading unnecessary panic. His concerns were based on concrete data and relevant experience. "Marcus, what do you recommend we do?" Martha asked. "First, basic thermal insulation in the houses," Marcus replied, showing a prepared list. "It doesn't have to be perfect, but a few simple measures can make a big difference. Second, a stock of fuel for heating, firewood, gas, coal. Third, basic supplies in case we get isolated." Kenneth, who had been one of the most skeptical, raised a practical question. "How much is this going to cost? Not everyone here has money for major home renovations." Marcus had anticipated this concern and prepared economical suggestions. "You don't need to spend a lot," Marcus explained. "Insulation with old newspapers, extra blankets on the walls, sealing cracks with fabric. The important thing is to reduce heat loss. I can teach simple techniques that cost almost nothing." The atmosphere at the meeting gradually shifted from suspicion to genuine interest. People started asking practical questions about preparation instead of questioning Marcus's intentions. "Could you teach us those techniques?" asked Sarah, who had been one of the most resistant. "Of course," Marcus replied, visibly relieved. "I can help each family individually or organize group demonstrations. Whatever works best for you." The meeting ended with the decision to organize practical workshops on preparing for a harsh winter. Marcus offered to coordinate the activities, and several people volunteered to help with logistics and outreach. "Marcus, I apologize for misjudging you," Dorothy said at the end of the meeting. "Your intentions were good all along, and we didn't recognize that." "No need to apologize," Marcus replied sincerely. "I understand my behavior seemed suspicious. The important thing is that now we can work together to prepare properly." In the following days, Marcus became a respected figure in the community. His transformation from suspect to consultant was radical and swift. The same people who had once avoided him now sought his advice on emergency preparedness. Marcus organized the first workshop in his own home, demonstrating insulation techniques that neighbors could implement with cheap, accessible materials. "See how it works," Marcus said, showing how to install makeshift insulation. "Newspaper between two layers of cardboard works very well. Old blankets can be used as temporary insulation on the walls." Dorothy and Sarah were among the most interested, taking detailed notes on every technique demonstrated. They had become enthusiastic supporters of Marcus after understanding his true intentions. "Marcus, could you help my family prepare our house?" Dorothy asked. "I have 3 young grandchildren and I'm worried about this winter." "Of course, Dorothy," Marcus replied. "We can start tomorrow. I'll help every family that needs it." Marcus began dedicating his days to visiting homes in the neighborhood, helping families implement basic insulation improvements and emergency preparedness. He worked for free, driven by the satisfaction of finally being able to contribute positively to the community. "I've never seen anyone so dedicated to helping others," Martha commented to Elizabeth during a visit to the market. "That man has a heart of gold, and we nearly treated him like a criminal." The improvements Marcus implemented were simple but effective. Sealing cracks, insulating pipes, installing basic heating systems, organizing fuel and supply stocks. Each house became a little more resistant to the extreme weather conditions that were approaching. During the process, Marcus also shared knowledge about first aid, emergency procedures and resource management during prolonged isolation. His lessons were practical and based on real experience. In emergency situations, organization is key, Marcus explained. Everyone needs to know where the supplies are, how to use the equipment, and what to do if someone needs medical help. Families began organizing into mutual support groups, creating a system where more prepared neighbors would help those with fewer resources or knowledge. Marcus coordinated this network of solidarity, ensuring no one was left behind. The whole community needs to be prepared, Marcus said. "It's no use my house being safe if my neighbors are in need. Either we all prepare together, or everyone remains vulnerable." This philosophy of collective preparation definitively won the trust of the residents. They realized Marcus was not a paranoid individualist, but someone genuinely concerned with the well-being of the entire community. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. In January, Marcus's predictions began to prove accurate. Temperatures dropped faster than normal, and the first signs of a harsh winter appeared. Intense frosts, strong winds, and exceptionally low nighttime temperatures confirmed his weather analyses. "Marcus was right," Dorothy commented, watching the thick frost covering her property. "If we hadn't prepared, we'd be cold already at the start of winter." The improvements implemented in the houses were already showing effectiveness. Families who had followed Marcus's recommendations reported a significant reduction in energy consumption for heating and greater thermal comfort during the cold nights. "Our house has never been this warm in the winter," said Sarah, thanking Marcus during a meeting at the church. "My son hasn't even caught a cold since you helped us with the insulation." Marcus constantly monitored weather data, keeping the community informed about developing weather conditions. His forecasts became a reference for families to plan their activities and additional preparations. "Folks, the data shows next week will be even colder," Marcus warned during a community gathering. "Let's review our heating systems and check if our fuel supplies are adequate." The shift in perception about Marcus was complete. He had not only become accepted by the community, but also a respected leader in matters of preparation and safety. His house was no longer seen as a suspicious fortress, but as a hub of knowledge and support. The children, who used to make up scary stories about the strange man on the mountain, now asked to hear his military adventures and learn about survival. Marcus discovered he enjoyed teaching and proved to be an excellent storyteller. "Uncle Marcus, tell us again the story about when you saved those people in the flood," Toby, Sarah's son, would ask during one of the regular visits families made to his house. "Only if you promise to practice the safety techniques I taught you," Marcus replied with a smile. "Knowledge without practice is useless." Marcus's social integration also brought deep personal changes for him. The forced isolation was being replaced by genuine and meaningful relationships. He found that helping others was therapeutic for his own military traumas. "I never thought I'd feel so at home in a place," Marcus confided to Father James during a visit to the church. "These people have become my family." In February, Marcus organized an emergency communication system for the community. He distributed portable radios to key families and established a communication protocol that would work even if conventional systems failed. "In real emergencies, communication can be more important than supplies," Marcus explained. "We need to know if everyone is okay and coordinate our mutual help." The system included simple codes for different types of emergencies, set times for routine communication, and procedures for requesting help. Marcus trained several people to act as local coordinators, decentralizing leadership to make the system more resilient. "If something happens to me, you need to be ready to carry on," Marcus would say. "Preparation can't depend on just one person." Samuel, who had been one of the most resistant at first, became one of the most enthusiastic coordinators. He used his store as a supply distribution center and communication point for emergencies. "Marcus, you've transformed our community," Samuel said during a supply organization session. "Before, we were just neighbors. Now, we're a family that protects each other." The growth of the sense of community was one of the most remarkable results of Marcus's work. Families began to get to know each other better, collaborate on common projects, and develop bonds that went far beyond emergency preparedness. "We should have done this years ago," Dorothy remarked during a meeting. "Marcus taught us that a strong community means safety for everyone." In March, the first forecasts of heavy snowstorms for the region arrived. Marcus analyzed the data with extra care, realizing that his worst concerns about the winter were coming true. "Folks, I need to be straight with you," Marcus said during an emergency meeting. "Forecasts indicate the possibility of a historic blizzard in the coming weeks. It could be days of total isolation, with extreme temperatures. The community received the news with seriousness, but without panic. Months of preparation had built confidence in their collective ability to face adversity. "Marcus, what do we need to do now?" asked Dorothy, coordinating the community's response. "Final check of all systems, maximum stock of fuel and supplies, testing of communication equipment," listed Marcus. "And most importantly, making sure everyone knows what to do if the situation gets critical." In the following days, the community intensified preparations with the efficiency of a well-coordinated military operation. Each family checked their supplies, tested equipment, and confirmed emergency procedures. Marcus visited every house individually, conducting final inspections and fine-tuning details that could make a difference during the blizzard. His attention to detail and experience in critical situations reassured the families. "Everything is running perfectly," Marcus reported after completing the inspections. "If the forecasts hold true, we'll be ready to face anything." The atmosphere in the community was one of controlled apprehension and grounded confidence. People knew they would face tough conditions, but they were certain they were adequately prepared thanks to Marcus's knowledge and leadership. "For the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of a harsh winter," said Mrs. Abigail, watching her perfectly insulated and heated home. Marcus taught us that proper preparation turns fear into safety. The community bonds strengthened during the months of preparation would be tested by the real adversity approaching. But Marcus had built more than physical defenses against the cold. He had created a network of solidarity and mutual support that would transform the blizzard from a potential tragedy into a demonstration of collective strength. In the early hours of an April morning, Marcus was awakened by the characteristic sound of strong wind and the feeling of the temperature dropping rapidly. He checked his weather forecasts and confirmed that the blizzard was arriving exactly as predicted. "The time has come," Marcus murmured, immediately activating all the emergency protocols he had established. The first step was to turn on the emergency communication system, contacting all the local coordinators to confirm that families were prepared and safe. "Folks, the blizzard has started," Marcus announced over the radio. "Activate all heating systems and confirm you have enough fuel. Next contact in 2 hours." The early hours of the blizzard confirmed the accuracy of Marcus's forecasts. The temperature dropped dramatically, the winds intensified, and the snow began to pile up quickly. Conditions that would have caught the community unprepared were now faced with calm. "Marcus, this is Dorothy," one of the coordinators communicated. "My family is fine. House warm, supplies organized. Thank you for preparing us for this." One by one, the families confirmed their safety over the communication system. The months of preparation were proving effective in the first real test. During the second day of the blizzard, conditions intensified beyond the most pessimistic forecasts. The temperature hit 15 degrees below zero, winds surpassed 50 miles per hour, and snow piled up over 3 feet in some areas. "This storm is exceeding our predictions," Marcus announced over the radio. "But our systems are working perfectly. Stay calm and follow the protocols we practiced." The town's power grid failed completely on the second day, leaving the region without external power. But the prepared families had working generators and independent heating systems that kept their homes livable. "Marcus, our generator is running perfectly," Samuel reported. "The store is warm and I can stay in touch with everyone." Marcus coordinated communications from his home, which had become the community's operations center during the emergency. He constantly monitored each family's status and coordinated help when needed. On the third day, the first real emergency arose. Sarah reported that her home's heating system had failed and the indoor temperature was dropping dangerously. "Marcus, I need urgent help," Sarah communicated with concern. "The heating went out and I have a small child here." Marcus didn't hesitate. He geared up properly to face the blizzard and left his house to help Sarah, navigating the storm with the survival experience he'd gained in the army. "I'm on my way, Sarah," Marcus communicated. "Keep everyone together in one room and use blankets. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Marcus arrived at Sarah's house carrying tools and repair equipment. He quickly diagnosed the problem with the heating system and implemented a temporary fix that restored warmth to the home. "There you go, Sarah," Marcus said after finishing the repairs. "The system is working again, but I'll leave a portable heater as a backup in case there are more issues. Sarah was moved by Marcus's dedication to helping her during such dangerous conditions. She realized he had truly risked his personal safety to ensure her family's protection. "Marcus, you saved my family," Sarah said with tears in her eyes. "How can I thank you for this?" "No need to thank me," Marcus replied simply. "That's what we prepared together for. No one gets left behind when we face hardships." Marcus's actions during Sarah's emergency further reinforced his leadership and credibility in the community. People saw that he not only planned well, but was also willing to risk his safety to help others. On the fourth day, Dorothy reported that Mrs. Abigail, the 78-year-old woman who had been one of the first to support Marcus, was feeling unwell and needed medical attention. "Marcus, Mrs. Abigail is having trouble breathing," Dorothy communicated worriedly. "I think it's because of the intense cold. What should we do?" Marcus quickly assessed the situation and decided to bring Mrs. Abigail to his own home, which had the best heating system and medical supplies in the community. "I'll go get Mrs. Abigail and bring her here," Marcus decided. "My house has more efficient heating and medical equipment. Dorothy, help me prepare for the transfer." Marcus and Dorothy managed to safely transport Mrs. Abigail through the blizzard to the former soldier's home. There she was settled in the warmest room and received basic medical care that stabilized her condition. "Marcus, you have medications here that even the community clinic doesn't have," Dorothy observed, impressed by the organized medical supplies. "Emergency preparation includes health care," Marcus explained, monitoring Mrs. Abigail's vital signs. "In isolation situations, we might not have access to hospitals for days." Mrs. Abigail gradually recovered in the controlled environment of Marcus's home. The experience demonstrated to the entire community the importance of the medical preparedness the former soldier had implemented. "My dear, that young man saved my life," Mrs. Abigail told Dorothy when she felt better. "If I had stayed in my poorly heated house, I don't know what would have happened." During the fifth day of the blizzard, other families began facing various difficulties. Minor equipment problems, fuel stocks depleting faster than anticipated, morale issues due to prolonged isolation. Marcus decided to open his home as a community shelter for anyone in need. His property had the capacity and resources to accommodate several families at once. "Everyone, my home is open to anyone who needs it," Marcus announced over the communication system. "We have space, heating, and enough supplies for everyone facing difficulties." One by one, families began seeking shelter at Marcus's house, not because they were in immediate danger, but because they realized they would be more comfortable and safer in the better prepared environment he had created. "Marcus, can I bring my family to stay at your place?" Kenneth asked. "Our heating is working, but it's burning through fuel too quickly. I'm not sure it'll last until the storm ends." "Of course, Kenneth," Marcus replied. "Bring what you need. We have space and resources for everyone." Marcus's house quickly turned into a makeshift shelter, accommodating 15 people from 6 different families. The atmosphere was organized and comfortable, showing how proper preparation could turn an emergency into a manageable experience. "I never imagined a blizzard could be so peaceful," Martha remarked, watching the children play calmly in the heated living room. "In here it feels like we're in a normal house on an ordinary winter day." Marcus coordinated the communal life at the shelter with the same military efficiency he had applied to his individual preparation. There were scheduled mealtimes, shift systems for household chores, and clear protocols for using shared resources. "Organization is key when many people share the same space," Marcus explained. "Everyone needs to contribute and follow the rules for it to work well for all." The children quickly adapted to the communal life at the shelter. Marcus proved to be an excellent storyteller and activity organizer, keeping the little ones entertained during the forced confinement. "Uncle Marcus, can you tell the story of when you learned to survive in the forest?" Toby would ask, always interested in the ex-sergeant's military adventures. "Only if you help organize the supplies afterward," Marcus would reply, turning practical tasks into educational games for the children. During the evenings at the shelter, Marcus shared knowledge about survival, first aid, and emergency management. The families learned valuable lessons they could apply in future tough situations. "Marcus, you should write a manual on emergency preparedness," Dorothy suggested during one of the nightly conversations. "This knowledge is too valuable to keep to yourself." "Maybe I'll do that once the storm passes," Marcus agreed. "But the most important thing is that all of you learned by doing. Hands-on experience is worth more than any manual." The conversations during the confinement also allowed Marcus to share more about his military experiences and the traumas that had initially driven him to seek isolation. The neighbors better understood his motivation for obsessive preparation. "Marcus, you've been through very tough things," Sarah said with empathy. "Now I understand why you care so much about preparation. You don't want anyone to go through what you've seen others endure." "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "When you see people suffering from a lack of basic preparation, it marks you forever. I couldn't live in peace knowing I could have prevented unnecessary hardship." The understanding of Marcus's deep motivations created even stronger emotional bonds between him and the community. People realized that his obsession with preparation stemmed from genuine compassion, not paranoia or instability. On the 6th day of the blizzard, weather conditions finally began to stabilize. The temperature stopped dropping, the winds died down, and the snow stopped accumulating. Marcus analyzed the meteorological data and confirmed that the worst was over. "Everyone, I think we've made it through the hardest part," Marcus announced to the families in the shelter. The forecasts show gradual improvement over the next 2 days. The news was met with relief and restrained celebration. Everyone knew they would still have to face a few more days of difficult conditions, but the peak of the storm had been safely overcome thanks to proper preparation. "Marcus, you saved all our lives," Samuel said with emotion. "If we hadn't prepared the way you taught us, this blizzard would have been a tragedy." "We saved our lives," Marcus corrected humbly. "I just shared knowledge. You did all the work of preparing and facing it." On the 7th day, Marcus organized teams to check on the entire community's status and start initial recovery efforts. Even with the snowstorm still ongoing, he wanted to ensure no one had been forgotten during the emergency. "We need to check every house and see if anyone else needs help," Marcus said, organizing volunteer groups. "We can't assume everyone is okay just because they haven't asked for help." The check-in teams found that the entire community had weathered the blizzard successfully. Some families had used more resources than expected. Others faced minor equipment issues, but no one had experienced serious hardship or safety risks. "It's amazing how well everyone did," Kenneth reported after returning from one of the checks. "All families are safe, warm, and have adequate supplies." The discovery that the entire community had survived a historic blizzard without casualties or tragedies was a source of collective pride. The preparedness coordinated by Marcus had worked perfectly in the toughest possible real-world test. On the 8th day, conditions improved enough to allow safer movement between houses. Marcus organized a rotation system so some people could return to their properties while keeping the shelter running for those who preferred to stay. "Anyone who wants to go home can go," Marcus announced. "But my house remains open for anyone who prefers to stay until things get completely back to normal." Several families chose to remain in the shelter for a few more days, not out of necessity, but because they had developed a strong sense of community during the shared experience. Marcus's house had become a symbol of safety and togetherness. "Marcus, I can speak for all of us when I say this experience changed us," Dorothy said during a meeting at the shelter. "Not just because we survived the blizzard, but because we discovered how strong we are when we work together." On the 9th day, Marcus began coordinating the initial cleanup and recovery efforts, removing accumulated snow, checking for structural damage to houses, gradually restoring basic services like electricity. "Now comes the second phase of the emergency," Marcus explained. "Recovery and a return to normal. It's important to do this in an organized way to avoid accidents or problems. The work teams were organized according to each person's skills and physical condition. Marcus coordinated the activities like an experienced commander, ensuring efficiency and safety in all operations. "Marcus, you should coordinate emergencies professionally," suggested Father James, who had visited the shelter to check on his parishioners' well-being. "The town should hire you as emergency management coordinator." "Father, I've already found my calling," Marcus replied with a smile. "Taking care of this community is all I want to do." On the 10th day, The blizzard had completely passed and conditions allowed for the gradual resumption of normal activities. Marcus organized a final meeting at the shelter to evaluate the experience and plan improvements for future emergencies. "Everyone, let's talk about what we learned and what we can improve," said Marcus, leading the evaluation. Experiences like this are opportunities for growth. The families shared their impressions and suggestions for enhancing the community preparedness system. The experience had identified some weak points that could be fixed, but overall everyone agreed that the preparation had been exemplary. "Marcus, the system worked better than any of us could have imagined," said Martha. "We faced a historic blizzard, and we all came out stronger from the experience." The final evaluation confirmed the complete success of the preparation coordinated by Marcus. No one had been injured, no family had suffered serious hardship, no property had sustained significant damage. "You showed that proper preparation and teamwork can overcome any adversity," Marcus said proudly. "This community is ready to face any future challenge." When all the families returned to their homes, Marcus remained available to help with small repairs and adjustments needed after the blizzard. His continued dedication further reinforced his position as a respected community leader. "Marcus, you turned our neighborhood into a real family," said Mrs. Abigail during a thank-you visit. "Before the blizzard, we were just people living near each other. Now we're a close-knit community." End of story. So, dear listeners, what did you think of this story of transformation and overcoming? Marcus teaches us that sometimes what seems strange or different can be exactly what we need. Leave in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where someone was initially misjudged? Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this.